The air was thick with fog and ash as Jules drove into the nearly abandoned town of Ash Harbor. It had been years since she'd left this place, years since she'd seen the ocean turn black with smoke against a sky full of screams. But something had brought her back, some unresolved echo of that long-ago summer that refused to let her move on. She found Liz at the only all-night diner, the kind of place where the coffee tasted like regret and the pie was always fresh. Jules slid into the booth across from her, and the fluorescent light above cast a harsh glow on Liz's face, erasing the years, reminding Jules of the girl who used to stay up late talking about boys and dreams under the same unforgiving lights. Only now there were lines etched around Liz's eyes, stories of hardship and sleepless nights carved into her features. "I thought you'd be taller," Liz said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Yeah, well," Jules said, self-consciously, "I haven't grown in a while." It was comfortable between them at first, a shared history settling over them like the fog outside. Jules told Liz about her travels, about the places she'd seen, the things she'd done, anything to fill the silence, to push away the ghosts that crowded the room. But even her stories seemed tainted here, filtered through the haze of memories that both bound and suffocated them. They talked until the diner was empty, the last customers having driven off into the night, leaving them alone with the ghosts of the past. When the waitress came to close up, Liz paid the bill without looking up from the table. "You don't have to do that," Jules protested, reaching for the check. Liz lifted her head, her gaze sharp. "No, I got this. You haven't paid me back for the cherry pie yet." It was true. Jules owed Liz for the countless cups of coffee and slices of pie that had sustained them through that strange summer when they were just kids trying to make sense of a world that made no sense at all. Back then, Ash Harbor had been a sleepy town by the sea, a place where life moved at the pace of the tides, and the biggest worry was whether the bonfire would burn through the night. But now it was a shell of its former self. The houses boarded up, the streets empty, the sea choked with ash from the fire that had taken everything. In the quiet aftermath, as the town slept beneath a blanket of fog, Jules and Liz had roamed the empty streets, their footsteps echoing the emptiness in their hearts. They had walked until they reached the harbor, the remnants of the pier creaking beneath their weight. The once vibrant blue water was now a murky gray, reflecting the smoke that stained the sky. "Do you ever think about him?" Jules asked, her voice barely a whisper against the backdrop of the crashing waves. Liz didn't answer. She stood motionless, her gaze fixed on the horizon as if searching for an answer in the darkness. Finally, she turned to Jules, her eyes filled with a pain that mirrored Jules's own. "Every day," she said, her voice raw. "Every day I think about David." David. The name hung in the air between them, a specter from a past they could not escape. He had been more than just a friend to them, a brother, a confidant, someone who had offered them kindness and understanding when they had desperately needed it. And then he had become a victim, another casualty of a world that had turned upside down. Jules remembered the fire, the heat, the smell of burning wood and flesh, and most of all, the sound of David's scream swallowed by the flames. It was a memory that clawed at her, a constant reminder of their failure. She looked at Liz, searching for understanding, but all she saw was the reflection of her own guilt. "I should have protected him," Liz whispered, her words lost in the wind. "I should have been stronger." "We were kids," Jules said, reaching out to touch Liz's arm but pulling away when Liz flinched. "We couldn't have known." "But I knew," Liz said, her voice shaking. "I knew when I touched the locket. I knew the moment he took my hand." Jules felt a chill crawl up her spine. She remembered the locket, the one Liz wore around her neck, a silver heart that held a faded photograph of two young girls holding hands on a beach. And she remembered the moment when David had reached out to touch Liz's hair, his fingers lingering on the locket, the air between them crackling with electricity. Back then, Jules had felt a surge of possessiveness, a wild instinct to protect Liz from the world and from David, who had treated Liz like a fragile thing, like a butterfly pinned under his gaze. Now, as the truth of Liz's words sunk in, Jules felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. She remembered the look on David's face when he had leaned in to kiss Liz, the hurt and confusion in his eyes. In that moment, Jules had known that something powerful and dangerous had been awakened, something that threatened to consume them all. And then there was the fire, the terrible, horrific fire that had changed everything. Jules closed her eyes, trying to shut out the memories. But it was no use. They were burned into her mind, seared into her soul. She remembered the heat, the smell of burning wood and flesh, and most of all, the sound of David's scream swallowed by the flames. "We couldn't have known," Jules whispered, the words catching in her throat. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. There had been signs, whispers on the wind that had gone unnoticed, shadows that had danced on the edge of their vision, if only they had listened. A tear escaped Liz's eye, tracing a path down her soot-streaked face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "For what?" Jules wanted to scream. "For what?" But the question died in her throat. She couldn't bring herself to say it, to voice the fear that had become a constant companion. As the night deepened, the fog outside thickened, shrouding the diner in an eerie silence. The weight of their shared past pressed down on Jules, suffocating her, reminding her of all that they had lost. She could feel Liz's pain, the raw, agonizing grief that echoed her own. They sat in silence, united in their sorrow, each lost in the labyrinth of their own memories. Jules stared at her hands, tracing the lines and scars that mapped her life, each mark a reminder of the journey that had led her back to this moment, back to the ghost of her past. Then, as suddenly as it had come, Liz stood up, knocking her chair back. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice hoarse. "I need to get out of here." Jules watched her go, the diner door closing behind Liz like a final curtain. As the silence returned, amplifying the echoes in the room, Jules felt a profound sense of loss. It was the same feeling she had carried with her for years, the aching absence of something or someone irreplaceable. She rose from the booth, her legs stiff from sitting, and walked toward the counter to pay. The bell above the door chimed again, announcing another customer, a man who sat in the corner booth nursing a cup of coffee. His presence was like a physical weight in the room, and Jules found herself drawn to him. He looked up as she approached, his eyes meeting hers. In that instant, Jules saw a flicker of recognition, a shared understanding of the burden of the past. Without a word, he rose from his seat and walked toward the door, disappearing into the swirling mist. Standing at the window, Jules watched him go, his lone figure silhouetted against the fog. There was something about his departure that resonated with her, a sense of shared purpose, a feeling that they were all bound together by invisible threads of memory and loss. With a sigh, Jules turned away from the window and walked out of the diner. The cool night air enveloped her, carrying with it the salty tang of the sea and the faint crackle of distant flames. Looking back at the diner, she saw the faint glow of the neon sign through the fog, a beacon in the darkness, a silent witness to their shared past. As Jules stepped back into the gloom of Ash Harbor, she knew she was not just confronting the ghost of her past, but also the lingering echoes of love, loss, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. The fog seemed to press in around her, a physical manifestation of the emotional weight she carried. With each step, she felt the presence of those who had loved and lost, who had laughed and dreamed under this very fog. And she wondered if she could ever truly escape their grasp.